In the middle of Texas's limestone hills, isolation once carried a different meaning than it does today. In the 1850s, distance was not an inconvenience, but a condition of life. Roads vanished with rain, neighbors lived hours apart, and the law arrived only when summoned, and sometimes not even then. It was within this landscape that a remote ranch in Blanco County became the center of one of the most disturbing frontier stories ever passed down through regional records and oral history. The ranch was known locally not because people visited it, but because they avoided it. Townspeople rarely spoke its name aloud, not out of ignorance, but from unease. Silence in places like this often served as a form of self-protection. In March of 1854, that silence was briefly broken when a frontier physician was called to the property for what was described as a medical matter of a delicate nature. What he encountered would challenge not only his conscience, but the limits of law, faith, and authority on the American frontier. A doctor's ride into stillness. The physician, remembered in later accounts as Dr. Samuel Hayes, was among the few trained doctors serving a vast stretch of central Texas. When the message reached him, it carried urgency but little detail. Payment was promised. Privacy was emphasized. Such requests were not unusual in a time when childbirth and illness often occurred behind closed doors, especially in remote households. Hayes rode for hours through scrubland and rocky hills, traveling deeper into a region where the land seemed to swallow sound. As he approached the ranch late in the day, what struck him was not disrepair, but unnatural quiet. The house stood solid and well-maintained, yet lifeless. No animals stirred, no voices carried from inside. Even his horse shifted uneasily at the gate, as if reluctant to remain. At the door, the man who greeted him did not offer warmth or relief. Instead, he issued a warning. The doctor was reminded of his oath and told that what he would see inside was God's business, not the world's. It was a statement meant to shut doors rather than open them, and it set the tone for everything that followed. The room that redefined horror. Inside the house, order reigned. It was clean to the point of sterility, sealed against light and sound. Hayes was led upstairs and into a room that immediately defied reason. Along the walls stood 7 narrow beds. In each lay a young woman. All were pregnant. All were sisters. They ranged in age from adolescence to early adulthood, and none spoke. There were no husbands present, no visiting relatives, no explanation that fit the scene. Their father, calm and composed, explained that his daughters were with child and required examination. He spoke not with shame or secrecy, but with expectation, as if this arrangement were both natural and righteous. For Hayes, the realization was immediate and sickening. Whatever authority governed this household belonged entirely to one man. Whatever had happened here had been hidden not by accident, but by design. When law and faith look away. After completing his medical duty, Hayes left the ranch shaken. His first instinct was to seek guidance from the church, believing that religious authority might intervene where personal conscience had been violated. Instead, he encountered resignation. The minister he consulted acknowledged the gravity of the situation, but pointed to the reality of frontier life. Without testimony from the women themselves, there was little anyone could do. The law offered no more comfort. The county sheriff, responsible for hundreds of miles with minimal resources, listened carefully and then declined to act. A man's home, he explained, was considered his domain. Without a formal accusation sworn and spoken by the alleged victims, intervention would be viewed as overreach. Suspicion, no matter how strong, was not evidence. This was the paradox of frontier justice. Those most in need of protection were the least able to ask for it safely. Isolation did not merely hide abuse, it reinforced it. A letter that slipped through the cracks. Weeks passed, but the memory of the ranch did not loosen its grip on the doctor. Then a folded letter arrived, delivered quietly by a ranch hand who claimed he had been paid to wait, before bringing it. The handwriting was careful, the words restrained, but the message was unmistakable. One of the daughters had found a way to speak. The letter described a life of constant surveillance and obedience. It confirmed what Hayes already suspected. There were no husbands, no suitors, no choice. The women were prisoners, not held by chains, but by distance, fear, and the belief that they belonged to their father by divine and legal right. The writer did not beg for rescue. She asked only that the truth be known. Hayes brought the letter to the sheriff, hoping it would finally tip the scales. It did not. Unsigned and unsworn, it was dismissed as hearsay. Once again, silence won, not because it was truthful, but because it was convenient. Labor and the unraveling of control. The second summons came months later. Two of the daughters were in labor. This time, Hayes refused to go alone. He brought with him an experienced midwife, a woman known for her practical skill and refusal to be intimidated by claims of family privacy. What she observed inside the house confirmed the worst fears. Doors were locked from the outside. Shoes were absent, making escape difficult over stone floors and rough ground. The daughters flinched when their father entered a room. These were not signs of care. They were signs of captivity. During labor, control slipped. Pain stripped away rehearsed obedience. One daughter cried out words that sounded less like prayer and more like accusation. Another, when questioned gently about the child she carried, answered with careful phrasing that revealed everything without directly defying her father. She said the child belonged to the man who ruled the house and that she had known no other. For the first time, there was no ambiguity. Forcing the door open. Armed with sworn statements from both the doctor and the midwife, and supported by a young attorney willing to challenge frontier custom, a narrow legal path emerged. Instead of pursuing immediate arrest, they sought a welfare inspection, a limited court order allowing officials to determine whether the women were being held against their will. When authorities arrived at the ranch, the household was staged for inspection. The daughters sat in perfect order, repeating identical assurances of consent and well-being. It was rehearsed, polished, and nearly effective. Nearly. The youngest daughter was questioned privately. Instead of asking what had happened, the attorney asked what she wanted. At first, she could not answer. Choice itself was foreign to her. Then she spoke clearly. She would tell the truth, but only if all her sisters were freed together. That insistence shattered the performance. It was no longer possible to pretend consent where none existed. Arrest, trial, and judgment. The father was arrested without resistance. Witnesses later remarked on his calm, even satisfaction, as if he believed events were unfolding according to some greater plan. During transport, he spoke not of guilt or fear, but of protection, insisting that the world beyond his control would judge his daughters more harshly than he ever had. The trial that followed divided the community. Some recognized the crimes for what they were. Others clung to the belief that family matters should remain private and that the law had gone too far. The daughters testified with trembling voices, describing years of isolation, religious coercion, and threats disguised as moral instruction. The jury returned a guilty verdict. The sentence, 20 years at hard labor, was severe for its time, yet inadequate to undo the damage inflicted. Freedom without a map. Release did not mean restoration. The sisters emerged into a society that viewed them with curiosity, suspicion, and, at times, blame. They had survived captivity only to face judgment from the world their father claimed to have protected them from. With the help of a few allies, they established a small farm outside town and built a life together. They raised their children collectively, learned trades, and supported one another in ways no institution had. Some married later, others did not. What mattered was that their lives were finally chosen, not assigned. Lesson: This story shows that the most dangerous abuse often survives in silence, protected by isolation and unquestioned authority. When privacy is treated as sacred and distance keeps people from intervening, control can easily masquerade as protection. It also reveals how systems fail when they demand proof from those who are powerless to give it. Justice stalls, not because harm is invisible, but because no one is willing to challenge the boundaries hiding it. Above all, the lesson is this: isolation itself can be a form of violence, and freedom begins the moment silence is finally broken. If this video stayed with you, let it be remembered, not as shock, but as a warning about what silence can hide. History doesn't just live in books. It lives in the choices people make when something feels wrong. If you want more videos like this, where forgotten truths are brought back into the light, like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments, do you think isolation like this could still exist today?